Zoos are ideally placed to function as the bridge between the vast majority of people and the environment. This was said by Vili Lapiskachny, a previous executive director of the National Zoological Gardens. This project explores all the ways that this is true, first by looking at the contextual informants leading to the design question, and eventually the proposal and reflection thereof. First, we'll look at the site as an informant. The zoo is situated within the middle of Tshwane. However, we are looking closer to the microsite of the elephant enclosure. Through observation and desktop studies, it is noted that the elephant enclosure might not be the largest or the best enclosure, but the impact of the elephant situated at the heart of the zoo. The elephant enclosure is surrounded by four historically significant buildings, namely the Old Elephant Indaba, the Elephant on Davos, the Old Bay House, and the Old Carnivore House. The user experience can range around this area from rest and respite to being disconnected and transient. The history and successes of the zoo as an informant. Dating back to the 1800s, the zoo started out as a farm home, but after its purchase by the state, Rus and Aber became the foundation for the State Museum's menagerie. In 1913, Executive Director Dr. Gunning bought the upper extension of the zoo and planted indigenous plants along the ridge, a decision that has benefited many local habitats over the years, and while disturbed and somewhat invaded, the ridge is still wholly indigenous and ecologically sensitive. The National Zoological Gardens was officially established in 1916, and in the following years developed into a botanical garden where animals were kept. While some zookeeping practices were less than ethical, the zoo continued to be a forerunner in its approach to wildlife and conservation. The greatest project the zoo undertook was the construction of the Northern Territories under Dr. Bigelow. At the time, their enclosures were the largest in the world, and was the official move towards the open zoo, where enclosures were more like habitats. The next big innovation was the construction of the cableway across the Southern Territory. This was done as a move away from performing and harnessed animals, providing an alternative form of viewing. Up until this point, the zoo was founded on the basis of conservation and research. This shifted when the South African National Biodiversity Institute took over in 2018, prioritizing biodiversity. Thus, I aim to explore how spatial and ecological interventions can redefine the user experience of the zoo. This leads me to ask the question, what is a garden? The dictionary defines it along the lines of a cultivated area for recreation. However, it cannot be better stated than by garden historian John Sayles. The garden is a process. Gardens were initially only for the production of food, but soon developed into privately enjoyed status symbols. Master garden theorist Jean-Marie Morel once stated that as the nature of nature changed, so too did the way of designing with her materials. Meaning that the basis of a garden has changed throughout history, and one must learn to adapt with its design. The garden in the 20th century became focused on the pleasure of recreation it offered. Today, a garden needs to be balanced between the ecosystem services it can offer. In an article by Taylor and Hertuli, it is proven that biodiversity within an urban setting can be extremely beneficial. Thus, the purpose of the garden is inconsequential as long as it's biodiverse. So, where does a zoo and garden connect? Historically, they were both collections of the exotic. Both have been enclosed and studied for their intrigue. However, gardens and zoos are both simply habitats. The two precedents that I looked at was Babylon Soren and Monte Cassino bird gardens. Babylon Soren with its grouping of species and its movement from private to public, while Monte Cassino bird gardens has a layered experience and immersion in habitats. This leads me to my concept to reconcile the historical basis of a garden with the current objective of biodiversity and animal well-being through the user experience of an ecological space. I've set three principles to achieve this: layering ecological habitats through indigenous and water conscious plants, uncovering heritage through the existing buildings and circularity of materials, and lastly, to engage the public through the use of low tech techniques and didactic design. Together, these create a layered approach to the design, visualized within the concept and explored further. Moving into the proposal, Jean-Marie Morel states that the basis of a landscape design is through landform. Thus, the existing contours influence the layout of pathways. The design response to ecology starts with homogeneous and manicured vegetation at the center of the heritage axis, showing the start of the garden zoo development. The further away one moves from the center, the more wilder the biodiversity becomes, showing the historical movement from the tame to the wild. A wetland and retention pond strengthens the ecological value of the otherwise water-wise garden. The design responds to the surrounding heritage buildings, specifically the Old Elephant Indaba, the Elephant Rondovels, and the Bear House and Old Watering Hole. Users are educated and engaged through the museum, natural play area, and the 3D art installation within the rondavels. Here, people can experience the elephants up close, reliving Charlie the elephant's memory without the danger to or from the elephants. There are three different types of pathways. The heritage axis, which is a formal pathway linking the heritage buildings to the site. Organized pathways, which is paved, has straight edges, hedges, manicured, and homogeneous. And the organic walkways, which are rocky, natural, have wilded species of plants and insects, and is rich in biodiversity. There are three different types of spatial experiences. Intimate, where you are alone with nature and immersed within the environment. This is done through tall trees, landforms, and levels. These spaces can be used for respite from the outside world. Next is the semi-intimate spaces, where you are with nature, but you're not immersed within the landscape. This is done through small trees and rocks. These spaces are great for picnics and birdwatching. Lastly is the company space, where you can see the landscape as well as the public. This is done through small shrubs and buildings. These spaces are great for learning, people watching, and taking a selfie or two. This section shows the scale and use of natural materials. Next is fauna and flora. This planting palette is divided into foliage, restios, trees, and form-giving plants. Foliage gives the effect of green bulk, restios the effect of fluffy texture, trees give structure, scale, and shade, and form gives the definition and style. Most of these plants were selected are partial to sunlight and little water. These plants all have different flowering seasons, so the garden always has something to look at. These plants create habitats for insects, small reptiles, birds, and free-roaming animals. To reflect, the spatial and ecological interventions redefine the user experience through memory, atmosphere, and value.